Well then, may I first of all offer a very warm welcome to all of you who are joining this annual general meeting. I hope my voice doesn't sound too weird, but I am currently suffering from COVID and I'm working from home. Otherwise I feel pretty normal, but clearly I am infectious and therefore keeping away from everyone. One of the good things about remote meeting is that it's a pretty safe way of doing things. It's a very important time in the horticultural world. They've gone through a lot of difficulties in the past few years, and I'm sure that we all wish the professional horticulturists all the best wishes in the world for what I hope will be a better start in 2022. I had planned a short debate tomorrow. Well, planned it, you have to go into a ballot, and I had got the ballot. But unfortunately, I've had to pull it because I can't be there in person. I'm not allowed to be there remotely because that is a privilege for those with some long-term problems, and hopefully that's not one of mine. So I'm very sorry about that, because I was hoping to talk about the importance of horticulture to the environment, and also the need for much better training. And we shall hear more about that later from our very esteemed speaker. However, I shall, as soon as the new session begins, launch another attack on this in the hope of another speedy debate on the subject, because I don't think horticulture comes up enough in either House of Parliament. Having got my little beef out of the way, could I now pay a very warm tribute to a lady who I hope is with us in the shape of Sue Biggs. I can't see her on my screen, but you will know that she's been the absolutely dynamic force as the director of the Royal Horticultural Society, I think for the past 11 years. I don't know where those 11 years have gone.
Nor me, Janet.
I seem to remember coming in. Oh, how lovely to hear your voice, although I can't actually see you at this moment. But you've done an enormous amount, not just for the Royal Horticultural Society, but for horticulture in general. And I think you've been one of the key figures in getting the Ornamental Town Round Table Group together to act more cohesively and comprehensively for horticulture. So I personally want to thank you most warmly from my perspective as chairman. And I'm so sorry to say goodbye to you. You've been a wonderful companion, enlivened by some trenchant comments from time to time. And we shall miss you, but we do wish you a very happy retirement, or maybe you will go into some other course of action, because it doesn't seem to me the sort of lady who can easily retire and do nothing. But whatever it is, I do hope,
Janet.
I do hope we shall not lose touch.
Oh, that's really kind of you, and I will look forward to seeing you at Chelsea, if not before.
That will be absolutely lovely. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, for a few boring housekeeping rules, can I ask you all to keep mute for the presentations? As you know, otherwise you get these extraordinary echoes coming forth. If when we get to the question and answer session, or you want to ask a question at any time, please either put your hand up and hope I will see you, or put a message in the chat function. And I will look to my technical advisors to help me with this. Thank you, Georgia. So I should also let you know that the event is being recorded, and there will be a recording made available after the event. So maybe now turn to the technicalities of a meeting such as this, an AGM. I've had 9 apologies for absence. I'm not sure that I need to read them all out, unless anybody is dead keen to know who isn't here. but I do want to mention one in particular who sent apologies, and that is the Minister for Skills, Alex Burghardt MP. We had hoped we might have him to talk to us about skills, but sadly it was not possible for him. But maybe we can grill him on some other occasion. Now, papers for the AGM have already been circulated, and if necessary, you can find them because they've been posted here, I think, on the chat function. But may I assume that they have been read and I can take them as read? So it's really a question of approving or disapproving, or maybe asking questions first. So can I take them in turn? The minutes of the previous meeting about a year ago, if nobody has any queries, may I take them as approved? Obviously difficult, you can't have a show of hands so very easily. So could I say anybody who has unhappiness about them, you the ones please show, otherwise we'll take the others as approving. It looks okay to me. So the financial statement is next, a very simple one. Again, if there are no queries, may I put that to the meeting for approval? And if you don't approve, hands up, please. That seems to be okay. And finally, the activity report, which shows what we've been able to do in the last year. Again, if there are any queries, if not, may I take them as approved unless somebody actually says they're objecting. Now that seems to be pretty smooth. Thank you very much. And we now come to the annual election of officers. The following are all willing to stand for re-election. That's Ian Little-Granger, the chairman and registered contact. And this was a change of system a few years back. They obviously didn't quite trust peers to do all this on their own. However, I am happy to stand if people are willing to have me as the co-chairman. And then there are various vice chairmen willing to stand again. Lord Taylor of Holbeach, Robert Goodwell MP, Baroness Bennett of Manor Castle, and Lord Carrington of Fulham. John Speller wants to stand down as honorary secretary, and Lady Buscombe has offered to step up to that position. And Rosie Cooper MP would be happy to stand as another vice chairman. So unless there are any objections or queries, may I put these two for approval en bloc as being easier?
Janet, sorry, just to interrupt. I think Douglas Chapman MP as well would like to put himself forward for vice chair.
Oh, right. Sorry, I didn't seem to have him on the list, which is probably my fault.
No, it is.
So may I add that name? And again, are you all happy? Okay, that is fine. Now that actually concludes the business of the annual general meeting. We now turn what I think is a much more exciting part, and that is a briefing on education, training and skills in the horticultural sector, which is very close to my heart. And we have none other than Dr. Suzanne Moss, usually known as Sue, who is the head of education and learning at the Royal Horticultural Society. She knows a tremendous amount about this, and I'm greatly looking forward to hearing her speak. So, Sue, please step forward and give us of your wisdom and knowledge now.
Thank you very much, Baroness Fuchs. I hope I can live up to that. That's quite an introduction, but it's wonderful to be here today. It's an honour to be talking to you all this morning. So thank you for inviting me to speak on behalf of the RHS and on behalf of the Ornamental Horticulture Roundtable Group Education and Employment Subgroup. We like an acronym, I think, don't we, in this group? So, and thank you to everyone here, I think, for supporting the sector and for your interest in it. I think it's a growing sector and it's potentially very exciting. So it's great to see so much support within us. I think it's currently very difficult to start any strategic conversation at the minute without recognizing the challenging times that we're all living through. The pandemic and trade disruption have really changed our outlook, and for many people, they've changed how they live their lives, how they go to work, how they run their businesses. In addition to that, the desperately sad recent conflict also unfortunately has secondary effects, which include impacts on the horticultural industry and labour availability. As Baroness Fuchs noted in her introduction, it really has been a difficult time for the horticultural industry, but it's rallied and it's become strong. And what we've seen is a significantly increased focus on well-being from the general public, I think, on people appreciating their gardens and wanting to make that change for the better. We know that horticulture is good for people, and during these difficult couple of years, people have really turned to gardens and to nature in increasing numbers, and we've been trying to take advantage of that. In addition to that, the climate crisis we know is more acute than ever, and so horticulture can make more impact than ever. The changes are happening to the environment and to horticulture in many areas, and we're dealing with these effects now. So the introduction of pests and diseases to the UK, coastal erosion and how that affects our gardens, differences in temperature and rainfall, and the changes that we're all having to make as horticulturists and as people that cultivate our spaces have really come to the fore. So we know that plants are good for the planet. We know that horticulture, both professional and domestic, can have a net positive benefit on the environment. And therefore, a green economy is more important than ever. And horticulture is undoubtedly part of that solution. Sustainability itself is quickly becoming a watchword in the horticultural industry itself. The RHS published its sustainability strategy in 2021. And that commits us to creating a horticultural ethos, which is both net positive for the planet and net positive for people. But we can achieve neither of those net positives without also being net positive in prosperity, that is, having a solid and growing economic basis to work from. So in 2019, horticulture generated 28.8 billion for the UK economy. I'd never get tired of saying that because it's kind of astonishing, isn't it? And it supported over 674,000 jobs in the UK. We know it can do more. If you haven't yet seen it, I do refer you to the recent OHRG report on unlocking green growth, and that outlines the potential of the industry, how it might grow, and the activity required to reach that goal. Having a strong and solid economic base really is the foundation for all the benefits that we know that horticulture can offer. And that's a lot. I mean, the industry can offer plenty to this country and to the government's aims. For the government to achieve its environmental ambitions, and for horticulture to meet its growth potential, a skilled workforce is a no-brainer. It's absolutely vital. The horticultural industry itself has an excellent record in training. This year in 2022, we mark the 200th anniversary of training provision at the Royal Horticultural Society. Our first trainees arrived in 1822 to the garden at Chiswick. I was not there then, in case anyone was wondering. Many other organisations have similarly robust traditions and excellence as well in skills provision. And our challenge together as part of this group is to make sure that training remains relevant, of high quality, and also accessible to people in today's changing and challenging skills environment. In the industry, we are really encouraged by the skills reforms that the government is making, the Levelling Up White Paper, the commitment to technical education, and the 2016 skills plan. But we do still have a number of concerns, which we're hoping can be addressed in association with you to help us to reach those sustainability goals that we know are possible. So industry-funded research that we undertook in 2018 and 2019 has shown that the industry struggles to fill roles in skills trades, in professional and technical roles, and in supervisory management roles. So in short, that is pretty much people who are trained horticulturally, who have horticultural skills, and who are technically adept. So the barriers to gaining these skills, we found out from the industry, include that there are a lack of suitable applicants for many sectors. We're just not seeing people selecting horticulture as a career. The industry sees a lack of available and appropriate training, and it also sees a lack of awareness in people of those training offers and career opportunities. So that's for people coming into the industry, but also for people progressing within the industry from a continuing professional development point of view. We also know that around 66% of young people do not see horticulture as a skilled career. Programs and have that. I started my career at the RHS as a student at Wisley, and it was one of the hardest things I'd ever done, but so rewarding and really set me up for a career in the industry like nothing else could have. We also know that 27% of people would like to spend more time outside doing their work, and a greater proportion than that would consider a job in horticulture if they felt that it positively impacted the environment or their well-being. So if we get it right, there is the potential there. It's clear that we need to work on making horticulture a career to be proud of, to overturn that 66%. We need to provide the information that people need. We need to provide the advice to people who want to come into the industry, and we need to provide the opportunity for them to train. To understand and value the skills environment that horticulture works within, we need to make sure we're doing that, and we need to make sure that we detail the training requirements of these vital roles. I think with the inception of the Institute for Agriculture and Horticulture, we optimistically hope that horticulture can find a single home for its careers advice, which is supported by government funds. And we also hope that the industry can be supported to further understand its skills requirements in more detail and to make appropriate and accessible training available. In the meantime, the industry is providing some careers guidance of its own, such as Barley's excellent Go Landscape initiative and the RHS careers profiles. And also many employers are running work academies as well. The industry is also working on improving diversity within its workforce, which has traditionally been an area that we need to grow. We've got various schemes across various organisations, which include strategies to increase the number of workers from underrepresented groups, including minority ethnic and LGBTQ communities. The work includes a large number of grants to support community groups who are specialists in these areas, and over 1.6 million is being invested by the RHS over the next 3 years in one particular scheme to break down barriers and increase the diversity of learners on its training programs. More widely, the industry is investing heavily in skills and the structures around them. We're actively participating in the creation of occupational maps, of apprenticeships and T-levels, and we're really enthusiastic about the impact that these could have on entrance to the industry. But there are still concerns, I think, around the impact that these skills reforms may have on the existing quality training provision, which is currently provided by the sector and which is a legacy of that 200 years long tradition of training. For example, RHS Qualifications is an awarding organisation which has overseen entry to the industry for tens of thousands of candidates over the years. In many sectors, RHS training is seen as the industry standard. Lots of people have an RHS level 2 or level 3 qualification, and those qualifications are offered by 88 centres around the UK. We conduct over 12,000 assessments every year. And the benefit of RHS qualifications is that they're able to be offered part-time and in a flexible way, making them perfect for people who are retraining, upskilling, or changing careers. And we know that career changes make up a significant proportion of industry entrance to horticulture, without which the industry would just flounder. And RHS qualifications are really central to this skills pipeline. So the recent qualifications reforms aim to rationalise this qualifications landscape at levels 2 and 3. And that's a goal that we absolutely definitely support in principle. But in doing so, I fear that as the reforms stand, and there is a recent consultation out that we're currently responding to, but as they stand, the reforms do put the regulation and funding of RHS qualifications and other similarly valued specialist qualifications at risk. We really, really hope that a way can be found to maintain the regulatory and funding provision for career changes into the industry, in addition, obviously, to the very valuable 16 to 19-year-old market and disadvantaged adults. The 16 to 19-year-olds and disadvantaged adults are groups heavily supported in the reforms, but we hope that we won't forget career changes as well. So skills reforms are really positive, but the generic qualifications like T-levels and apprenticeships, which really are coming to the fore, they don't offer and they don't allow that low number but highly regarded specialist qualification that horticulture relies on. And as I say, we will be feeding back into this consultation, but we will also appreciate your support whenever possible. So we have 3 asks that we could work together on, if possible, over the coming year on skills with you. So that's firstly that the government, industry and training providers collaborate on best practice and skills delivery. The group support the OHRG to conduct an audit of training provision in the sector, so we can really understand the nuances of training and what works for certain providers and what could become best practice more widely, to assess the gaps that we have and to understand the very specific and specialist skills requirements more fully, and so to implement recommended action. Secondly, we'd ask that we work together to promote careers in horticulture and land-based industries more consistently and more accurately via career services, and work to alter the perception of horticultural jobs as low skilled and low paid, which we know that many of them are not. One of the ways to do this would be to ensure that the Institute for Agriculture and Horticulture includes ornamental and environmental horticulture as part of its core remit. Or if that's not going to be the case, that funding, alternative funding will be available to the sector for promoting careers in ornamental environmental horticulture. And thirdly and finally, we hope we can work together to protect funding for qualifications tailored to certain specialisms in land-based industries like the RHS qualifications, given that we really do rely on a suite of highly specialised technical skills, and land-based industries are often very, very different from core industries. This will really ensure that relevant skills are available, as without them, the industry simply won't meet its potential that we outlined in the Unlocking Green Growth paper. And I think now really is the time to meet that potential. I mean, horticulture is more relevant than ever now, but people are outside. We know we have to work on sustainability. Plants are one way that we can really make a net positive benefit to the environment. I believe wholeheartedly in its potential, and that's why I do what I do and why we push so hard to create amazing training at the RHS. All of our learners are passionate advocates of the fact that they can make a positive difference to people's lives. And if anyone ever wants to meet any of them, please come in and meet our learners. They're an awesome group of people. Really, the last thing I wanted to say, that a focus on horticulture really is an investment in the planet, it's an investment in people, and it's an investment in prosperity. In short, an investment in growth and an investment in sustainable future. And we would really appreciate, and we do value, your continued support. So thank you.
Thank you, Sue, very much for a very wide-ranging talk, and it's taken us through at quite a trot. And I'm sure there will be lots of questions and other points that people want to raise. So may I now ask if somebody would like to start off? Can I see Rosie Boycott?
Oh, yes. Thank you very much. This is my first meeting and I'm really thrilled to be here. So I have a couple of things that I'd like to contribute, as well as a question. I mean, one is that I'm the chair of something called Veg Power, which came out of the Food Foundation, and our sole mission on earth is to promote the eating of vegetables. We do those adverts that are on TV called Eat Them to Defeat Them. We're now in 1 million schools. We're very linked into the horticulture and vegetable growing trade. Sadly, the figures in vegetable consumption over the pandemic have taken yet another nosedive. And we very much feel that, you know, you have to get the pull through in order to increase the growing. We need the eating. And so the whole things are very bound up. And when I worked around the London Food Board, we did a project called Capital Growth. In fact, Sue Biggs was very involved in it. And Sue, I can't see you at the moment, but hello. And we set up 2,500 community vegetable gardens in London, and they're all still there. So I'm also helping Pam Warhurst, who did Incredible Edible, launch her next big project. And we are having an event at the end of April in the House of Lords to launch this. Anyway, so there's the various things that if anyone would like information about what we do in Veg Power, I can feed it around the committee, because I think that it's a sort of vital part of the chain as well, and encourages supermarkets to not make vegetables too expensive. But also my question is about how people get access to land, because that is what we always seem to come up against. And I think it's very complicated as well now under elms, and about getting going as a horticulturalist and finding yourself a few acres. And my other question is whether you think that if we did something like a mandatory procurement for public food within a certain area, like they've done in Italy and France, 20% within 20 miles, whether that could have a very good effect. So I'm sorry, that was rather a long contribution, but be grateful for any info. And thanks so much for doing this.
Right, I don't know whether anybody, including our speaker, wants to come back on this, because it raises rather wider issues than perhaps we thought we were dealing with. I've seen.
Well, I could pick it up another time offline if it diverts.
Yes, that would be very helpful.
Okay,
thank you very much. I can see Martin Emmett's hand is up. Martin, you have a special interest in education, so have you got some useful question or contribution to make?
Well, I was just actually coming back to Rosie's point, if that's okay. If I can introduce myself, I chair the Education and Employment Working Group of the Ornamental Horticulture Roundtable, and I've now just been elected as chair of the NFU Board for Horticulture and Potatoes, which is great because we can pull groups together. Thank you. But two points I'd like to just extract from what Rosie just said. As a school governor, I can say that Eat Them to Defeat Them is really hitting the mark, and we really could do with a similar sort of initiative which extends into what we'd like to call environmental, some might call ornamental horticulture. So it is a really good model to look at. It's had a really high impact in the school that I'm a trustee governor of. The second point, just in response to Rosie's comment, was that actually it's not just land, it's about planning as well. So getting access to land is one thing, but getting the planning permissions that you're going to need, especially when you start to talk about more intensive forms of horticulture where you might need glass houses. So there's a piece of work around planning as well as access to land. Thank you.
Thank you. Sue Moss, did you want to make any comments on this?
I think Martin from the production sector is probably more qualified to speak on that. So, but yeah, I think from my point of view in the schools, I think anything that brings horticulture in general to schools is a great plan. So thank you for the Eat Them to Defeat Them model, because it does seem to be working really well.
Yes. Could I ask Christine Blower to come in, because her hand's been up for quite a little while.
Thank you very much, Baroness Fuchs. I just wanted to say briefly, this is my first meeting. I'm absolutely sold on horticulture, and although I ended up spending my entire career as a teacher, it had originally been my plan to do a year and be qualified and then actually go and work at Kew Gardens, but I got stuck in teaching. Anyway, I just want to say I think something about careers, which is that there is now, as Martin and Rosie have said, an enormous amount of work going on in primary schools. Not enough. We could still do with more, and we could do with more people going in. But I think we sometimes miss a trick if we don't talk about the fact that this could be a job, that you could actually consider doing this at some point, rather than just, sowing a few seeds in your school playground, which is fantastic in itself. But actually, I think there's too little focus in the primary phase on what children might go on to do. And I really think that we should try and capture what is their obvious enthusiasm. And you can obviously see it at Hampton Court when you go and see the fabulous gardens that they produce and so on. That is really an opportunity. And also just to say, if there is ever an opportunity to visit any primary schools and talk about gardening in school, or Eat Them to Defeat Them, or any of those things, I would be delighted to join in. Thank you.
Sue Moss, do you want to come back on this one?
Yes, please. Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. And whilst we know, I think we often focus that careers effort, don't we, on secondary schools, because we know that's when young people are actually choosing their careers. But actually, when people discount careers, is largely between the ages of 5 and 12. That they're thinking, actually, that's not something I want to do, and they really are shaping their career path right from then. So we have our campaign for school gardening, where we're taking schools, we're taking things into schools, but we are also our school visits to site, where we're trying to build in more careers messages there and getting more real world examples of what people do. But also we're working with a charity called Education and Employers, and that's working across the industry with industry mentors who they kind of go into schools and they talk about, they basically they're doing it on Zoom at the minute, but they often go into schools and they try to get the pupils to guess what they do for a job, and then that kind of builds in that really interesting careers discussion. So I couldn't agree more, and it's an area that hopefully will be growing over the coming years. And I would also say that if you fancy doing an RHS qualification, it's great. They're very flexible.
Now, Lord Carrington, I can see the hand up.
Thank you so much, and my sympathy to you for having COVID, although I'm rather glad that the QSD has been postponed, as I might be able to partake next time round, as I was unable to do it tomorrow.
Yes, there's always a silver lining to a cloud.
My second point was that I refer everyone to this week's Farmers Weekly, where Martin Emmett has provided most of the input to an extremely good article on the problems being faced by horticulture, and I congratulate him on it. My third point, more relevant to this discussion, is that there is a scheme which I'm sure many of you know, but I didn't know till very recently, called Work and Retrain as a Gardener, RAGS. Now, RAGS is exactly what it says. They place people who wish to move from one career to another into workplaces in gardens. And we currently have one of these people who is an ex-midwife, and possibly midwifery is a bad job to lose, so to speak, in the current circumstances. But we have gained, as a result, a very good part-time gardener. She works here 2 days a week. Now, that scheme seems to me to be something that we should all know a bit more about. I mean, okay, it's not going to take an awful lot of people into gardening and horticulture, but it is something that concentrates on people who want to change careers. I think it is supported by the RHS, but perhaps Sue could give us a bit of a comment on that. Thank you.
Right. Sue?
Of course, yes, absolutely. The RAG scheme is really valuable, and we do work with them a little. And I think the RAG scheme is one example, I think, of those amazing legacy training programs within the UK. And they all kind of give something different to it. But I completely agree. The best way to be training in horticulture is to be doing it. Whether that's kind of part-time as a practical qualification, or whether it is by working in a job in an apprenticeship, or in something like the RAG scheme, or in a similar work-based training program at one of the botanical gardens, or a National Trust property, or an RHS property. The industry just has such a rich heritage in those amazing work-based programs that I think we absolutely do need to support and preserve. So yeah, thank you for mentioning that.
Sue, could we look for a moment at the careers service and teacher guidance in schools? Because it seems to me that for the younger folk, as opposed to the ones changing their career, they are all important influences. Are we satisfied that they know enough about the opportunities and are encouraging pupils enough?
No, I don't think so, I think is the answer to that. I think we need to do more work on that. And I think there's probably a joint piece of work to do if we can work with you maybe to support, if you could support us in kind of getting those messages into more broad career service messages. But the industry is also now working within itself, I think, to get those messages in through Barley's Go Landscape. They have mentors who work with schools who go in. We're setting up a program from the RHS called New Shoots, which will work much more heavily on careers, and we'll go into schools, and we'll also be working with the companies who go into schools digitally to present careers as a syllabus-based learning structure, but which brings real-world jobs into that structure. So actually, I think what we've always struggled with in the industry is trying to make the theoretical, which isn't directly in the curriculum, relevant to the curriculum, but also to have young people be able to see that as a potential career path for themselves. So hopefully this digital work that we're doing, as well as the on-site work that we do, will really help to support that. So we'll certainly keep you up to date on that, if you could also support us with the more broad careers issue.
Thank you, Sue. I can't immediately see anybody else who has got a question, but please correct me if I'm wrong on that, please. Oh, I can see Sue Masson. Sue.
I just wanted to mention Horatio's Gardens, because they were founded because a young student was killed by a polar bear, and in his memory, his parents started Horatio's Gardens, which are gardens in spinal units. And I can't tell you how much pleasure and hope and inspiration they've actually given patients and their relatives and visitors, and volunteers come in to help. And they do have a gardener in the position of guidance. And it gives people encouragement about how marvelous plants and gardens are. And I think, you know, they should be supported. And actually, there are other gardens in hospitals, and it's so important because visitors and critically ill people, they need a space, and especially with the corona around, to get out of sitting and waiting sometimes. So they should be encouraged at all times. But the Horatio's Garden will be on show, the people running the stall at the Chelsea Flower Show.
Yes, I wonder also whether it might be an opportunity to give an indication of careers for people at the actual gardens, even if it were just a simple leaflet or a link to something electronically.
Some of the gardens, one at Stoke Mandeville, has a small hut, really, little garden to give instruction to people, and they do have booklets and things.
Well, I was just wondering if that might be stepped up to the other Horatio Gardens, and indeed other gardens that are open to the public, if we should be doing more in that way. I'm just putting it out as a question. I can see a hand from Sue Biggs. Sue?
Well, I thought I can see Rosie actually, so I was really thinking we were closing about to say something. So I don't know whether Rosie, you wanted to go first, and then I'll come in. Okay,
right, Rosie, over to you.
I was just going to add to the Horatio Gardens, the extraordinary gardens done by Thrive, which are the sort of mental health ones, and also the importance, I think, now of getting doctor prescribing to work with community gardens. And I mean, for instance, with our capital growth ones in London, all you have to do is type in your postcode and it will direct you to the nearest community garden, which is probably not very far away from where you live. And we've had a lot of studies done on them about benefits to mental health, and also, interestingly, from the City and Guilds, the best route back to work for the long-term unemployed, for all sorts of wonderful reasons that probably everyone who gardens can figure out, but all that data is available. So there's an enormous kind of, you know, there would be a great reason for a government investment in this type of garden. And as I said, Sue, very nice to hear your voice, because I know we've talked about this a lot. So over to you.
We have indeed.
Sue, Moss, did you want to make any further comment on this?
Only that I think absolutely right. If we can have further, I mean, the RHS and other organisations, I think, can invest so much in that, but more government support is always welcome. Specifically around funding, but also planning as well.
Yes. I can see Lady Watkins. Mary, would you like to come in now?
Thank you very much, Janet. And I'm sorry that you've got COVID. I have got a negative result today, but I've had it too. So I think maybe our weekend away might have
Indeed.
contributed to it. We were at a War Widows weekend, Janet and I, the other day, and I think a few people have got it since then. I wanted to just, first of all, thank Sue for her support, and you, Janet, which resulted in the Florence Nightingale garden at Chelsea last year, a year late, but nonetheless really greatly received, and that will be transferred to St Thomas's at their expense, which hopefully we'll all enjoy when that is complete. But I think with this whole apprenticeship scheme, it's really important to have a modular approach that means people can just do one module. And I think Rosie Boycott's just said a lot of what I wanted to say as a mental health nurse. If people could just do a module which is gardening for health, online and maybe locally, that would count towards eventual careers. Because for some people who've been really unwell with either mental health problems or with long-term learning disability, a career may be something quite difficult to achieve quickly, but a module that will get them out and about and linking with people will, I think, be really helpful. So I wanted to emphasize the need for, simple units to get this going. And I think then you would get social prescribing for that module, which would actually bring in quite a lot of money. Thanks very much.
That's quite a thought. Sue Moss, you mentioned earlier in your address to us the need for collaboration, I think you called it, between all the different units responsible for education and training. How would you see this coming about? Because it seems to me this is one of the problems. Everything is a bit disparate, scattered.
Yes, it is. And I think, I think the skills reforms have gone some way to getting employers together and talking about the occupations that they want to see within the industries and creating programs and the apprenticeships and T-levels to work towards those. But I think there is a need now to there's a piece of work that we need to do, a piece of research in the first instance, to look at the broad range of training across the industry, because lots of training providers do find, I think coming back to that modular approach, they find that they don't always need a whole apprenticeship or a whole T-level, but some of the training can be a little bit more piecemeal. And the skills reforms are certainly going away from that piecemeal and modular model into very, very large qualifications. For example, our RHS qualifications are 240 guided learning hours for our largest qualification. And currently one of the smallest that the government is suggesting is 540 guided learning hours. So they are going to be really quite significant, and lots of them will be full-time qualifications. So I think there is a need for us to look and to just to find a baseline and just look at that assessment of what is the training which the industry is finding useful. And I think that's what we're asking for support on in the first instance, if there is any kind of funding training provision for that, because we need to know what employers are offering, what they find useful for them, what those models of delivery are, and whether those qualifications are funded or not. Because I think my fear is that the industry requires a certain amount and a certain type of training delivered in a certain way just to function as it does. It functions now. My worry is that if the skills reforms go through as they are, that the industry will still need that training, but what will happen is that the training will be delivered but deregulated, which will mean that there's a potential drop in quality of that training because it will no longer be regulated, because the industry requires it to function as it does. So looking at those, what we have now within the industry, and just creating that baseline and understanding where we are, I think would really help us to see what the next steps are and what the next step of development is, whilst we're also looking at the skills reforms more broadly. So that was the collaboration I think that we need currently. I don't know if Martin wants to say anything else about that from the production side.
Martin, do you want to come in at this point?
No, I just totally agree with what Sue says. We are moving towards sort of larger frameworks, and it is some of those key components that we want to make sure remain readily accessible.
Thank you. Right, I think Sue Biggs, you still have your hand up, so may we bring you in now?
Yes, thank you. Just a couple of points actually, and touching on some of the earlier points. With Baroness Masham talking about Olivia Chappell actually is the boss there, and she is amazing. Absolutely brilliant what Horatio's Gardens have done, and also Thrive, as you say, Rosie. But also, just so that you know the good news, I suppose I have to beat the RHS drum still, and that's very much that in June we open our first NHS healing garden. So that's coming at NHS Hospital in Lewisham, and that's a pilot, and it's going very well at the moment, and hopefully we will roll out all around the country in time the healing gardens actually that are for the staff and the community more than the patients, because the patients, there are lots of great organisations doing gardens for patients, so that's really what one of the things that we're looking at there. But and also touching on the careers point, I think Chris Moncrief is on this call, and I'm not sure whether Chris knows about this, so this might be about to come as a horrible shock to Chris, but I discussed with Tim Hobson last week about us doing at Chelsea a big in the pavilion all on horticultural careers on the RHS stand in there. So I really hope that we can get that together so that everyone who comes to Chelsea to see it, but also the BBC hopefully will then cover it. So I hope for both first timers and career changers that will help get that one through. But the real reason why I put my hand up before was to say thank you to all of you from APPGHG, which, by the way, took me about 5 years to be able to say that run of initials without stuttering over it. But
I try not to say them at all.
You always were so smart, Janet. But I have loved working, particularly with Janet and with Ian and everyone else on this group. And I sense, you know, there's several of you on this call who are coming for the first time. So I shan't take it personally that you're joining just as I'm leaving. But I really hope, my real plea for this is that we end up with a horticulture industry that everyone could be proud of. And it is really apt and right that today was about education, because the green growth that you've all hopefully seen is great and amazing that our industry could get to 40 billion. But none of that will happen unless we get the education right. And if we don't really focus on education fast, you know, children are rather like plants. They take years to grow properly. If we don't start now at primary school, at secondary school, right up to career changes, and having the government support that education, whether it's curriculum based or it's T-levels, we really are going to have a terrible problem in the years down the road. And maybe none of us will be sitting here, but there are still some quite young faces on this call. So I think they will still be sitting here when there is a major, major problem ahead. So if you care about horticulture, if you care about our environment, because everything in that green growth plan from OHRG is but on behalf of the industry, it supports all of the government's environmental targets for the 25-year plan. It supports all of the social sustainability as well as climate change sustainability. But most important of all, it can deliver a thriving, brilliant horticulture industry for this country. And I remain puzzled as to why government, as opposed to this group, seems to remain indifferent to the future of ornamental horticulture and landscaping. And I think if something can grow from 28 billion to 40 billion, I think it's a crying shame that it isn't taken more seriously. So as Janet says, I do beat this drum rather often, and I shall continue to beat it until June the 16th when I step down from the RHS. But I'm just, I suppose, thanking you for your support and asking for your continued support so that finally horticulture gets the recognition it deserves.
Well, I think that's certainly the ambition of the officers of this group, and I'm sure group who will have been inspired by all the points that have been made. I think that probably now brings us to a conclusion. So could I thank everyone who has attended, and particularly those like our speaker in particular, Suzanne Moss, and the others who have contributed their wisdom. Could I thank you all very much? I think we've had a great deal to think about as a result of this meeting, lots of things to pursue, but above all, the need to make sure that horticulture is important in the government's eyes, because their help is extremely important, because industry can only do so much itself, and I think it is doing that already. So I'm very clear that continued pressure must be put on whatever government is in power, because I think they're all equally, if you like, not sufficiently interested in this very important sector. So thank you all again. I'm delighted to have members attending for the first time. And could I say that anybody who would like to become a member, it's very easy. Or if somebody wants to become a member at a later time, simply contact me by email, or I think you will find the addresses of the Secretariat somewhere here that you can look at. So I'm looking forward to another exciting year for the group, starting, of course, with that much cherished visit to Chelsea Flower Show. So thank you, all of you, for attending, and also to the Secretariat behind the scenes, without whom I wouldn't be able to do anything at all, such as my technical lack of knowledge and expertise. So thank you all behind the scenes as well as in front. So may I now say goodbye and thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Janet. Get better soon.
Thank you so much, John.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.